Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon area. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting guests, and like you people out there, about who they are and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about. And this evening we'll be talking about the neuroscience of stress reduction. The neuroscience of stress reduction. And my guest this evening, Jerry Ryan, who's a long-time guest from a long time before, and he's done a lot of things since the last time he was on the show, and it's good to see you again.
Nice to be back, Don.
Yeah, it's going to be good because you sent me some written material about what you're up to in stress reduction, and I was fascinated, and I just got lost in it and kept reading it over and over again. So I'm looking forward to what we'll be talking about. And as you know, the first half of the show, I'll be talking to you about who you are personally and where you came from and whether you have corns on your feet or whatever, you know. And then we'll transition into the second half with a little break between. And then we'll see how much time we have left for you to talk about stress reduction and that kind of stuff. All right, so you ready? And I am a little less nervous than I was when I first got in here because we had some delays in getting the crew together, but we're here now and we're getting going here. All right, and if I were to ask your best friend, who is Jerry? What would your best friend say? Be your best friend. Jerry is what or who?
Well, I think my best friend would say Jerry is a guy who likes to help people take care of themselves.
Okay.
By teaching them all the things that he's been through and what he has learned, if it were my best friend describing me. Because I've been through a ton of different things in my life.
So I've heard.
That most of them have been extremely stressful, and they've led me to basically find ways to deal with life. And life comes at everybody, and it's always stressful. So I think that my best friend would say that I'm a guy who helps people deal with their life, helps people get through things.
And you're successful at that.
Yes. Well, I've made it through a whole lot.
I know. We're going to be talking about that.
I've made it through a whole lot of stuff, and so I've gotten a lot of techniques that I can share with people. And most of it's just things about the way you think about life.
Yeah. All right. Well, when and where were you born?
Born in San Bernardino, California.
San Bernardino.
Yeah, San Bernardino in 1956. I wasn't there 6 months, and we moved all the way to Washington, D.C.
Clear across the country.
Clear across the country, 6 months old.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't remember my California time at all, obviously, 6 months.
Well.
You know, and then we moved, my dad worked for the federal government. He was in data processing back when a computer would fill this entire room.
Yes.
You know, and so
you are kind of old.
He was always moving with advancements, basically, because it was cutting edge technology then.
Sure.
You know, so we moved all over the place, and I ended up going to 11 schools in 12 years, and got bullied all the time as the new kid because we never seemed to move during the summer. It was always over Christmas, and I'd come in January as a new kid, you know, and I was always one of the biggest kids in the room, and so I got picked on. They had to try the new guy. So that's kind of where my first stress began, and learning how to adapt to all the things that can happen to you in the real world that you have no control over, like being bullied.
And you recovered from that, and do you accept being bullied nowadays?
Well, I mean, it's not a whole lot I can do to stop somebody from bullying me in the condition I'm in right
But you've got that brain. I know the brain you've got.
Well, snappy repartee helps too.
You bet.
You know, I mean, but mostly it's being able to diffuse situations. I took a whole lot of martial arts in my life, a lot of yoga, and I taught martial arts, taught yoga, those kinds of things. So all of those things helped me to learn how to not engage in the stress or to engage in the people who were coming at me, whether it was verbally or physically.
So as the years have gone by, you've gotten better at that.
Gotten better at it, much better at defusing the situation, even within my own mind, where I didn't escalate things that didn't need to be escalated. And that's part of the martial arts training, is to know when you have to and know when you don't have to, kind of a thing. And most of the time, you really don't have to.
This is going to be really interesting because personally, about every 8 or 9 years, I go back to my psychologist for a tune-up, bring up the speed, and find I'm still learning. But then experiencing you and remembering a little of the past, and as I'm listening to you describe what's going on, I find that let go, drop your shoulders, and be mindful, and let go and relax and enjoy. See, it's happening.
It's working already. And we haven't even begun.
We've only just begun. See, I'm practicing my singing.
I hear you.
Yeah, and I've always got 1 or 2 trick questions, if you remember.
Oh, I know. I know how you are.
Yeah. Why were you born?
Why was I born?
You still ask the same question back at me.
I do. That's that pause to give me a moment.
Why were you born?
I was born to do. I was born to do what I'm doing right now. I think that everything, in retrospect, looking back at my life, everything that I've ever done, from working in medical facilities, emergency rooms, operating rooms, learning all the medical side of things, to the metaphysical, the martial arts, the yoga, the spirituality that are involved in both of those, and all the trauma that I've been through in my life have all led me to accumulate all this knowledge with which I can now help people who are stuck in their own trauma, and they're feeling hopeless, helpless, nothing is in their control. They fear their own lives. They fear the next morning. They want to just shut down and not even wake up some days.
When are you going to Washington and straighten out that group down there? They need some stress reduction, don't they?
Well, yeah. Well, they're, from my client's side, that's some of the biggest stress going on.
Oh, my God.
Is just the upheaval nationwide with everything, whether it's race or politics or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, even going to the adulteration of food. I mean, everybody's got their own platform that causes them stress, and a lot of times it's governmental institutions that regulate those platforms, unfortunately.
I can imagine that your brain is having a hard time expanding because you've got a normal head size, because that's so much you've learned. Yeah. So let's continue on. Anything significant about your national or cultural heritage that the viewers would be interested in about you?
Well, basically, I think I'm somewhat of a chameleon from all the moving that we did as a child.
I like your metaphors too.
I think I used to hate the fact that we moved all the time because I was constantly bullied. And that's not a fun thing to be in, and that was all the way through high school. But in retrospect, I look back on it and I appreciate the fact that I lived in cultures that my classmates only read about. I saw things firsthand that my classmates only read about or saw TV shows on. I got to experience the South, the East Coast, the Midwest, the Southwest, and the West.
Intimately.
All of these things, living there, listening to different dialects, all of these things, so that I could match whoever I'm sitting across from now. I've been there, I've heard that dialect, I've eaten the same kinds of foods, been to the same kinds of festivals, those kinds of things that have really, I think, made me a much more well-rounded person, have allowed me to actually do the job I was born to do.
And you were born to, what is that job again?
Help everybody.
Okay.
Help everybody get out of where they're stuck. help them better themselves, help them get past their stress, help them know that it's okay. Just that, it's okay.
A real dyed-in-the-wool people helper.
Yeah.
I
And I
feel
think
good.
I've done that for my whole life. From age 15, I started working in hospitals. I worked at the University of Kentucky in the emergency room as an ER tech, ER aide, basically. And then from then on, it hasn't been that many times in my life where I'm not in some helping position as a job. And the times when I haven't been, I'm not happy and I'm looking for the helping job again.
Yeah.
Hmm.
A religious preference. Anytime I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, you don't have to answer it. Sometimes I do that and I
Well, that's
misjudge.
quite all right.
Do you have a religious preference nowadays?
Religious preference basically is just overall spirituality. Raised Roman Catholic, went
Been there, done that.
to Roman Catholic schools for, I think, all the way up through the 8th grade. And even one of my high school years was in a Catholic school. So, but I don't have any horror stories about any of it. I don't have the horrible nuns or the abusive priests or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, I just had, I thought, really quality schooling. Basically, I kind of set the religion part of it off to the side because at one point in my life, I began taking martial arts and yoga, and so the Eastern religions came in.
Of course.
And of course, that tends to make you broaden your thoughts on the whole concept of spirituality. And so at this point now, I can encompass everything from Buddhism to Islam, Sikhism, Catholicism, Christianity. We're all just supposed to love each other.
Yeah.
In every religion, pretty much, it says, just don't be a jerk.
You've said spirituality twice in the last couple of minutes. What do you mean by spirituality? What does that mean for
Well,
you?
for me, it's just the contact with individuals, the oneness of people and the oneness of things without any imposed doctrines or laws that tend to separate everybody. That's my concept of spirituality. The religions themselves seem to be based in man-made rules,
Yes.
for the most part, which, again, separates people and makes them aggressors toward one another most of the time.
What's a spiritual connection? I hear some people talk about, we had a spiritual connection. What does that mean when you say you've had a spiritual connection with someone?
For me, I think it's when you feel almost at one with that person. You can see it in their eyes that they have the aha moment that we all want to have, where the person that you're trying to tell something to gets it, and you can see the eyes light up, kind of a thing. And there's a, I don't know, there's that feeling of a connection, a definite connection that's more than just I'm talking to you, kind of a thing. It's more like I'm talking with you, not I'm talking to you, because the to you makes you a separate entity.
And the feeling that occurs in you when that happens.
Yes.
And the feeling occurs to me, and it's hard to put a name to it. May I suggest one that I've used before? And when someone asks me about spiritual and spirituality, it's hard to define. It's one of those that are beyond what our brain is capable of conceptualizing and putting into words. It's a feeling, for want of a better term, that occurs. Like when I'm in the checkout line in a store, and a little baby is in mom's arms, and mom's busy putting groceries up, and little baby, our eyes, I don't know who starts it, but our eyes connect. And he or she can be 3 or 4 or 5 months old, and he or she knows it, and I know it, and there's something that goes on between that baby and I, beyond involving the cortex. And if I move, he's going to follow me with his eyes. And if I smile a little bit, he's going to smile. And it's hard to put into words, but when that happens, those are those magic moments that make life worthwhile.
Exactly, the spiritual connection. And I see that happens with people who don't know your language either. You can have that same kind of an an intimacy, if you will.
Yes, of course.
You know, because words aren't always everything.
Yeah.
Although
Sometimes
they
get
are
in the way,
extremely
too.
powerful,
Oh, God, yeah.
you know, and they're containers of power, and what we say actually becomes, they're not always necessary to get that spiritual connection.
We're not going to have any fights, are we? Because we're
I
on the
don't think
same
so.
darn page, and I love it, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I
Occasionally.
enjoy coming on here,
Yeah,
because we are on the same page.
yeah. And I find myself experiencing you as I'm following my procedures and my directions like that. And occasionally something goes on between us as I'm more than listening to you, I'm hearing you with beyond just what my eyes are seeing. And maybe during this hour, we may have a few seconds where we'll have that momentary connection. It's timeless.
Well, and I believe that that's the core of mindfulness, is this experience, this awareness of all five senses, of everything that's going on in the moment. And that is so lost in today's world.
Oh, man. Computers and
You know.
Let's get through the bio segment.
Exactly.
I'm enjoying you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And your formal education, and you've been educating yourself all these years.
Right. Well, we were talking earlier about that's part of why we're on the planet, is to continue to learn as long as we're here. And so my formal education is I've got a master's degree in counseling. My primary counseling is rehab, and everybody thinks that's, you know, drugs and alcohol only, but it's any transition truly requires a rehabilitation. If you're getting out of the military, that's kind of a rehab. Getting out of prison, that's a rehab to get back to the real world. Getting diagnosed with some life-threatening illness, you need rehab. You need resources to get you through that. Drugs and alcohol are part of the rehab, but people that are changing their lives, making a major transition, that's a rehabilitation process. You have to get over your old stuff to be the new you.
Yeah.
So I've got a master's in that. I do have a PhD in natural health, which means I'm not the pill pusher guy. You know, about the only pills that I push are supplements, you know, because people don't get the right food anymore. You know, so you need a good broad base multivitamin, for example.
Sure.
That kind of stuff. We spoke earlier about adulteration of food.
Yeah.
And that's part of it too. So that all affects how we think and how we act.
I've been considering naturopathy, all things natural in terms of what I ingest. And I hope I continue with that sort of thinking to explore it a little more. Because I'm at an age where we can look back on my physical health and count the things that have gone awry in my aging, and I'm on top of now. But let's not talk about me anymore. Yeah.
We digress.
And you, what do you do now? You're still paying your way, or paying your dues, or?
Well, basically, I've got my own private practice
Yes.
where I'm doing the counseling, and then I've started doing a life coaching business as well. So the life coaching is particularly focused on stress reduction, because I don't have to really, I don't have to diagnose anybody like I would as a counselor.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty much I can grab anybody off the street and they've got stress.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to broaden what I do. I've seen such success with my high anxiety people and my post-traumatic stress people, stuff like that, that I'm thinking that I would like to broaden it to the work environment, schools. I think schools is a place where I would really like to take this as it moves forward. Because if we could teach little children how not to get stressed.
So the learning process is valuable in teaching how to learn how to not get stressed out or overstressed.
Well, you know that infant that you were watching in the line?
Yeah.
That infant isn't stressed at all.
No.
And that's kind of our basic state of oneness with the planet and with the universe, is that infant state. And so what I try to do, and what my purpose on the planet still, is to get everybody to turn off their autopilot, basically, and tune back into the moment. This is where we live. We don't live in the past. We don't live in the future. We live right now.
I've got to tell you this. I've usually got a couple tracks going, and one of them is in the background, in the deep background. But this one keeps recurring as I'm listening to you and we're in conversation. And the song, "We've Only Just Begun."
Mm-hmm.
And that keeps recurring. I'm not sure why it does.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening between us, and as I'm appreciating you as the kind of human being you are, I think about, I am still just becoming, if I may.
I think we all are, Don.
Okay.
You know, I think we're all, if we are truly living in the moment, then we are that moment each time. If we are 100% in that moment, all of our sensory stuff, we're seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, feeling, the present moment, that's what's going on. That's who we are. We're not what we used to do. We're not what we might do in the future. We are what we are at the moment. And so by being more sensory aware of everything, we start turning off all the things that we're not.
I'm re-educating or adding to my learning in that regard. Thank you. You're going to bill me when this is over?
Yeah.
You have a partner? A boyfriend, girlfriend,
I
husband?
owe my wife of, it'd be 41 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we got married on New Year's Eve, 1976, so 41 years she's been with me.
41 years.
And she's still with me despite all the trauma that I've dealt with, and head injuries and hospitalizations and
Oh my gosh.
all those kinds of things.
Yeah, just from your life and your living, you have
Right.
some depth
Well,
that
and
you
I
have to experience.
actually, I owe that woman my life, because when I was in the rollover car accident in 94, when I got to the emergency room, within the first 15 minutes, the doctors came and took my wife into the side room and said, "Would you sign this do not resuscitate order?
No kidding.
He's not going to make it."
Oh,
And she said, well, she started yelling at him and got very graphic in what she was saying about, you don't know who you're dealing with. If
Did you hear
anybody's
this?
gonna pull through this, she's told me. No, I was lights
that's
out,
right,
nobody
yeah.
home, kind of. And that's why they wanted that do not resuscitate.
of course.
You know, because I was so bashed up. They said, there's nobody lives through this. And she said, get back in there and fix him. You don't know who you're messing with. If anybody can come through it, he can. And so to this day, I owe my wife my life, because she could have said, okay, and signed it. And they would have just stopped working on me.
Look at that camera and tell her that you owe your life to her.
I owe you my life, Marcy. Typically, when I tell that, I start tearing up just because it's so powerful to know that she really did save me from what would have been a certain death had she signed that.
And you're still keeping on.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well,
again, I got saved for a reason.
children, grandchildren, any of those?
Children, 2 boys. They both live in the Portland area. One of them actually lives in my house with his wife. We have many levels on my house. And my other son lives in town, probably within 5 miles of us, and he and his wife have 6 children. So I have 6 grandchildren, ranging all from one son. The other one hasn't begun yet. Ranging from 21 down to 3 years old.
Do they like Grandpa?
They love Grandpa. We actually do family nights about every 2 to 3 weeks, where everybody comes over and we take turns cooking and play board games and that kind of stuff. So it's always, and for Thanksgiving, my entire family, I got 3 brothers that live locally. My mother's still alive, she lives locally. Thanksgiving, we just had all of them and their kids and their kids' kids. You know, so we had about 35 people at my house for Thanksgiving. So family is huge for me, Don.
Of course.
It's huge. It's kind of a core. When I look back on my life and think about all the times I've moved, the only real thing that was a constant in my life is my family.
Yeah. Political persuasion, is it appropriate to ask you that kind of a question? Do you have a political persuasion that you'd care to divulge to the viewers or not?
I really don't. I listen to both sides,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much. I try to keep it centered so that I can get both, because that way I can listen to the people who come to me
Mm-hmm.
and do it without judgment.
Are there something other than both sides?
Something other than both sides?
Is there something other than both sides? We're talking about nowadays both sides.
Both sides, that's because that's the way it seems.
Trumpsters and the far left super liberals.
Well, and there's the middle people who are getting left out of all of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I'm just trying to stay middle ground, because then I can communicate again. I feel more of a oneness with people if I don't pick sides.
Of course. Yeah, it tends to force someone to choose a side, so to
Right.
speak.
Well, it's kind of becomes then automatically us and them.
Yeah.
And that just destroys the oneness that we all should be looking for.
What's the difference between sympathy and empathy?
Oh, the difference between sympathy and empathy is sympathy is basically just feeling sorry for somebody, whereas empathy is trying to feel what they feel.
And being successful at it.
And being successful at it. And that's also part of what the self-awareness, the mindfulness pieces do, is increase that sense of, I guess another word for empathy would be compassion. You know, just to be caring about the person and not, I kind of almost feel like sympathy goes with pity, almost. Being on this side of physical function, I've had people sympathize with me, and coming out of their mouth, it sounds like pity. I feel sorry for you, they'll tell me, in those words. It's not like, I can't understand how you must feel. You know, that would be more of an empathy piece. Whereas a sympathy, I feel sorry for you, and I can remember, one of the flash memories I have of the ICU, very brief, was that there was a bunch of my friends coming in, and one of them said, "I feel sorry for you." And I went off. I was very verbal and told him, "I don't need your sympathy. You know, if you cared, you wouldn't have said that." And I told the rest of the people in the room, "Get this jerk out of here. I don't want him back." Basically, because I was in a state where I don't want to hear that. You know, I want to hear that you care, but I don't want to hear, "I feel so sorry for you."
Are you? I want to know that you feel what you imagine I'm feeling, so that I'm not alone in what's going on.
Exactly.
That kind of connection.
Yeah, that kind of, well, the empathy part, where you feel what, or you try to feel what the other person is feeling.
Well, you know, I can go on with this, talking this way before we get to the main part of the program. So let's, persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or admired, or look up, any names come to mind?
Dr. Wayne Dyer was about one of my favorite people. I think I've read everything he's got out there. Deepak Chopra.
Of course.
You know, these kinds of folks that have been very influential in my thinking. But then there's people like Anthony Robbins, the
ice cream guy.
Oh, no. Tony Robbins, the success coach.
Oh, yes, of course.
You know,
I get those Robbins mixed up.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the Robbins wrote a thing about food and how he got rid of his whole portion of the Baskin-Robbins thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I understand the confusion there. But Tony Robbins and people like Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, people who are kind of the same mindset that we're talking about, where they're helping other people, they're minimizing the stress out there, they're telling people just let go of some of this stuff that you're carrying. And that's kind of how I've been able to, I mean, I've learned from them. I feel like those folks were my teachers. And they also taught me that the words that we say are powerful. You know, when you say I am, whatever comes after that, your mind makes it a fact. You know, it's like, well, I'm sick today. Well, you're going to be sick. You know, I mean, that's the kind of thing. Or I'm healthy, I'm wealthy. It's just, you know, we start laying in those patterns and it happens.
We better stop because I can go on with you on this part to get to the second half of the show. So we'll take a break for a couple minutes. Okay, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for all you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And we're talking about the neuroscience of stress reduction. And now that I've bugged you about who Jerry is, we're going to talk about what he does. Okay?
Okay.
All right. You sent me some neat prompting questions, and I'm going to ask you about how'd you get into stress management? Stress management. What is
Stress
that?
management is basically it kind of came from my life. Like I was saying earlier in the program about how it started as a kid, the stress in my life from moving all the time. You know, 11 schools in 12 years is stressful for anybody. And I know that they have these stress scales available that tell you that if you move once in a year, it's X amount of points. And if you move several times over your lifetime, it just stacks up. So,
As I remember, it was called SUDS, Subjective Unit of Distress.
Yeah, exactly. And so just all the moves I made put me over the top of that. 11 schools in 12 years, so that was always...
ongoing for 12 years.
Yeah, and always being bullied. So that was stress number one. I grew up that way, and it actually, by the time I was in I think the 6th grade, our family doctor said I was getting ulcers. They put me on a baby food diet back then.
Really?
And then,
big time.
Yeah, and so that was about, when I was in high school, I started taking martial arts and things and to kind of try to give me a way to deal with this. I started weightlifting, playing football, those kind of things, doing physical activities to burn off the stress chemicals. And of course, that's also about the time drugs and alcohol came into the picture, also to try to ease my stress. And then at about age 30, I was attacked on the job. I worked at a hospital in the operating room, night shift. Somebody came in to steal narcotics and whacked me in the head here with an oxygen tank or something and broke my skull. I was in a coma for 3 days. They gave me a 5% chance to live. And I came out of it, obviously. And when I did, though, I had lost my sense of smell and taste for about a year and a half. My memory was like Swiss cheese. I couldn't remember anything. And I was an A student, and all of a sudden I can't add 7 and 7, that kind of stuff. And my emotions were just, you know, I could be laughing and crying back and forth in 15-second spurts. Or I could be playing around with you, and all of a sudden you might say something. Next thing, I'm picking you up and slinging you across the room because I was bodybuilding.
Your brain, huh?
Yeah, it just really messed me up. But I was huge back then too because I'd been bodybuilding since high school. You know, so that was how I was dealing with my stress. And then 7 years later, I got in a rollover car accident that did this to me. You know, broke my neck, the shoulder blade, blew out my lung, and wiped out both frontal lobes at that point. And so basically the doctors look at me and look at my films and go, you shouldn't be able to make complete sentences. You should be sitting here drooling. And I'm like, ta-da. The brain rewires. That's the beauty of the neuroscience.
Yes, yes.
You know, and so all the stuff that I'd done in the past, the drinking, the drugs and all that, and the weightlifting and the martial arts and the yoga, all kind of helped me deal with the stress. It started out with the bad coping skills of drugs and alcohol, and then moved into the more beneficial ones. And in the last 20 years or so, since this happened to me, I've been really focused on the whole neuroscience, because it's a nervous system problem that I have. And it's made me a whole lot more attentive, because I can't feel anything from here down. So my body sends me stress signals all the time if something's wrong, and I have to be attentive to that, or I could die, basically. So a little bit of incentive to watch your stress level.
But you're still getting some degree of sensing from the rest of your physical body.
Sure, as does everybody. Even though the spinal cord is messed up all the way up at my neck, my body will still let me know if there's a wrinkle in my sock, for example, that's pushing against my toe. You know, those kinds of things. I still get the signals, except what it does is it skyrockets my blood pressure, and I start sweating like crazy because it doesn't give me a natural response. But that's one of the things that has made me be more attentive to stress across the board, because even mental stress can cause that kind of a reaction in somebody with spinal cord injury.
Sympathetic versus parasympathetic nerve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what happens because of the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and skyrockets blood pressure, heart rate goes crazy, sweat, and all that kind of stuff. So it goes basically fight or flight.
Yes, of course.
You know, major fight or flight. And then I have to figure out what's the problem. But that's the same way that I'm teaching other people. It gave me kind of an insight. Now I teach other people, okay, you're going through these symptoms. You know, you're having a hard time breathing. You can't get out the door in the morning. You're sweating like crazy. You feel like your heart's racing, and you feel like you're being chased by a tiger, but you're just standing in line at McDonald's. You know, these two don't work. You know, so it's led me to share this information with other people about finding their stress and dealing with it.
You have a lot of stuff here, and we want to be sure that you cover those major areas, because we can go on lingering in one of these for a long time.
Oh yeah, these are all.
So you'll be the judge about how much time we're going to spend. That's a tough. What is stress? What is the mind? What is the mind-body connection? So shall you volunteer which to talk about next, or shall I ask you?
Well, I think everybody pretty much knows what stress is. We all are stressed. And what the mind is kind of, most people think the mind is just the activity of the brain, but it's actually the neuroscience from the last 20 years has shown that it goes beyond that. If you figure that everything in the universe is energy, everything is vibrating at a different level subatomically, and it's these vibrations, that's the energy that connects everything. So our brain basically is processing the information that comes from these different energies out there, whether it's a visual energy, auditory energy, tactile energy. All these different things in the world are giving us signals. And our mind basically is filtering those signals that are coming in, processing that energy flow, which has information with it, and then determines what to do with it. But the mind isn't just within, because you can also, your thoughts and your behavior have been influenced through your life by other people's thoughts, other people's behavior, things that you've learned from others. So the mind is not just within, it's also within others. So it's kind of interpersonal as well as a neurobiological piece. So it's like two facets of the mind that actually make up our whole thought process, and which then goes into our emotions and our behavior.
So there's something more than the mind.
Well, the mind is more than what everybody thinks it is.
Okay.
I think it's the twist of the words there. Whereas most of the doctors have thought that the mind is basically the activity of the brain.
Yeah, biological.
Right, but it's more than that.
Uh-huh.
Because if it's just biological, how does it communicate outwardly with others? How does it learn from others if it's only within?
So what I've learned from others may be stored in my neocortex. So I'm having a hard time grasping what you meant a few minutes ago when you're talking about the vibrations and the stuff going on out there in the world. I think I think it needs to be incorporated somewhere, stored in 2 or 3 levels.
Well, it's basically a processing that our mind does. It processes the energy as it moves through us. That's what I'm talking about with that. The energy all contains information, whether it's information about us, whether it's information about the situation we're in, but we are using that energy, it's flowing through us, and we're doing something with it. We're taking action using the energy and using the information it gives us.
Okay.
Okay? Was I more clear?
Clear enough.
Okay.
Well, so what should we talk about next?
Well, I'd say all of this goes toward the mind-body connection, truly.
And that's my point. There's something more than the mind-body. There's another contributor.
Okay, well, I think the mind and body it does incorporate everything. It incorporates your vessel, so to speak, but it also incorporates the broader part of the mind. The mind-body connection is, both of these are giving us signals 24 hours a day. Your body's giving you signals, and that can affect your thoughts, it can affect your emotions and your behavior. You know,
Your feelings, huh?
Yeah, well, if your body's giving you a signal that you're in pain, for example, okay, well, then the next thing could be that the emotion that goes with that is I'm suffering. You know, because that's a whole thought process. And then the behavior follows that I'm not going to walk on that leg for a while. I'm just going to put it up, or I'm going to ice it, or something like that. So there's a real ABC process to this. With the mind-body connection, A is basically the thought that occurs about whatever it is.
Okay.
And the B is the emotion that that thought brings. And then the C is
What you do.
the behavior that generated from the emotion. So if A is a good thought, then it's going to produce happiness, joy, gladness, all those kinds of fun emotions that we like to have, love, caring, and it will give us the behavior then that supports keeping that in our life.
I finally remembered one thing I can challenge you on, quote, challenge you on. All right.
Oh, you've been waiting this whole time.
Negative emotions. I think you said negative emotions in here. I don't think an emotion can be negative.
Well, I would say uncomfortable then. If you don't care for the word negative, we'll just change it to uncomfortable. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Well, which I would feel would be negative, because an uncomfortable thing is usually not positive to most people. It can be.
We're talking about survival
positive.
or what's
Right. And see, what I'm talking about is that same ABC process. If a person has a uncomfortable thought, or a thought that isn't good, or whatever you want to term it.
that I don't like, I don't want.
Okay.
It's not useful.
Right. So,
Maybe. Okay.
okay, well, so whatever the term is for a thought that is not positive and does not generate a happy emotion. So if you have a thought about you being wrong, for example, or about something else being not enough, that's going to generate an emotion of sadness, fear, anger, none of which most people are comfortable with.
Sure.
And so in order to get rid of that emotion, then C happens, the behavior. And typically what I've seen is for the uncomfortable emotional feelings that people have, they will try to get rid of it. That's the whole thing with that behavior there. They will try to eradicate that emotion because it's so uncomfortable. This is where people start to reach for drugs, alcohol, porn, food, gambling, anything that will fire off the dopamine up here.
Yeah.
You know, and this is kind of how addictions start, truly, is from the uncomfortable feeling that the person wants to get rid of. I'm trying to, through the mindfulness aspect, teach them to capture the thought first. If you can capture the thought, change the thought, you change the feeling, you don't have to mess with the behavior.
I'm smiling because I was thinking something rather new for me just the other night as I'm laying in bed about to go to sleep. I find what I'm thinking about, what's on my mind just before I doze off, the dreams are somehow reflecting what was on my mind or my mood or my feeling at the time. And that's as far as I've gotten with that. So it's a different way of looking at my reality as I get older, and it never stops. So I'm interrupting you. Where do you want to take us now? Because we've got about 8 or 9 minutes left.
Well, how about maybe a demonstration of mind-body connection, for one thing.
Of course.
I would like for you to sit for a moment as if you were at someone's funeral. Okay, and just kind of try to bring that feeling of being at some place and sitting the way you would. Okay? Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, now without changing position, I'd like you to try to feel really happy. Kind of difficult, huh? See, I've got a cartoon that I keep posted. It's Charlie Brown.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he's like this. And Lucy walks up, or one of the other kids walks up and goes, "Why are you standing like that, Charlie Brown?" He said, "Well, this is my depressed stance." And I said, "Well, why are you doing that?" He says, "Well, how can you get any joy out of being depressed if you don't stand like this?" So it was like Charlie Brown showing the whole mind-body connection.
Yeah.
Okay, now, on the other hand, there's a different way to do this where you can feel empowered. If you were to stand for a moment like Superman, or be seated like Superman if you don't want to stand. Superman or Wonder Woman, either one. They have their hands on their hips, chest out and open. And that will give a person a feeling of power, empowerment, and freedom. Basically, you've opened up the chest cavity, so you're breathing better. A lot of this has to do with breath and taking deep breaths into the abdomen. So when you're sitting like this at a funeral, you're crunched down, you're not breathing. Your lungs will take 5,000 cc's of air. When you're stressed or focused like this in downward position, you only get 500 cc's.
And you're observing the results of what you're doing with me right now. Without my being aware of what I was doing, I was actually doing it because I listen very well.
And I'm watching that too, as you said.
I know you are.
And this is the kind of thing that will help, is opening up, breathing. One of the tools that I have people do is put one hand here and one hand here and just breathe. If this hand moves more, then you're stressed. You're breathing only in your chest. And you want to take it down to the abdomen. Breathe in through the nose, visualize the air going all the way down to the abdomen, stretch the abdomen out slightly, and then pull it back in. It's like filling a glass of water. Take the air all the way down to the bottom, fill it up, and then as you exhale, top goes first, and then you slowly squeeze the abdomen in to exhale fully. And just by doing that several times, it takes care of controlling your fight or flight, basically. It calms the vagus nerve, the one that is basically your delivery system for fight or flight. It runs through the center line of your body, affects your swallowing, your heart rate, your breathing, even your abdomen. So what deep breathing does is, from high school biology, you got your chest cavity here, abdominal cavity here, big thick muscle diaphragm. When you're breathing shallow, this diaphragm doesn't move much. When you take a deep abdominal breath, it pushes down, it squishes your abdominal cavity like a balloon. And in your abdominal cavity, you have nerve cells directly attached to the brain. And by squishing it down, it sends a signal to the brain that says, release serotonin. Serotonin is the neurochemical that makes everything, there's enough. There's enough food, there's enough love, there's enough shelter, there's enough clothing. And so it automatically releases that chemical just by taking some deep belly breaths. And that's why people calm down from deep breathing. Every culture on the planet has this phrase that means, take a deep breath, which is pretty amazing when you think about everybody everywhere knows that that's kind of the center for being more calm and relieving your stress.
You had some pretty good learning, at least in recent years, for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because I know what you're talking about on a personal level rather than just the academic way of learning it. As I was practicing being a psychotherapist or a psychologist.
Yeah. And so what this does for a lot of people too is I can tell them that this isn't, none of this stuff is your fault, the way you feel. It's your default. It's your default survival wiring that's going on. So it automatically frees the person up. They don't feel like they've made a mistake, like they're bad, like they're an error. They don't have the guilt. They don't have the shame. Because I'm telling you, you got all this wonderful brain chemistry going on up here. The best part is you're the head chemist. You can change it.
Listen, I was a Catholic kid in an altar boy for years, and don't make me give up my guilt.
Oh, well, it's a good thing, though, to give that up.
So, okay, now we got a couple more minutes we can talk. What else do you think would be useful for the viewers to hear about what you're about in being less stressed?
Well, being less stressed, basically it's living in the present moment. That's what all of this is about.
Okay,
living in the present moment is mindfulness. What our mind does, there are 4 things that our mind does on a default basis when we're not actively engaged in something. The first thing it does is starts a running commentary about your current situation and how it's not good enough. If I only had a better wife, a better house, a better job, less kids, more kids, a dog, whatever, nothing's ever good enough. Okay, then the second step is it starts time traveling. Goes back to the past and takes everything you've ever read, heard, or seen to support that thought you just had. And then it projects it into the future to go, and it will always be like this.
oh my God.
Then step 3 is it goes, okay, if my current situation sucks, and it always has and it always will, what does that make me as a person? Am I even worthy of being here?
Stuck.
Yeah, how do I get out of this? Then after you do that self-flagellation there and beating, it goes to step 4. Well, what does that make me to everybody else out here? Do these people like me? Do I even like them? And then it goes right from there to, well, if they don't like me, then yeah, my situation really is bad. It goes right back to step 1 again. And then you go down the rabbit hole, basically. So that's the 4 things that the mindfulness can help shut off, because that's a constant chatter going on up here when we're not actively engaged. The mindfulness helps people keep all 5 senses actively engaged at all times in the task they're doing. That keeps their mind from running off to the future and worrying about the whole world of what if, and it keeps them from going back to the past and being depressed or sad about what hasn't happened that they wanted to happen or what has happened that they didn't want to happen. It keeps them in the present moment and keeps them actually grounded where they don't have all that chatter going on. It's almost like taking a computer that's running 25 programs and minimizing about 20 of them. Pretty much. That's what mindfulness does. I mean, it doesn't shut your brain off. It doesn't shut the emotions off, but it just kind of shrinks them down so you can look at them and without being steamrolled by them.
You're going to give me a lot to think about. Yeah, I'm a little embarrassed because I've studied so much of this many, many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But hearing it coming from you, maybe an updated version or whatever, is reminding me of to recover, rediscover what I've learned before,
Mm-hmm.
plus adding my own experiencing and my own history in the past.
Sure. And I think this also builds into people's ability to rebound
Mm-hmm.
from things too, because it helps them not ruminate and think and think and think. You know, it's a way to shut off the thoughts. It's a way to change the channel on the show we're watching in our head.
Well, we're going to need to stop before they yell at me. Look at that camera and say some final message to the viewers about anything that we talked about or anything else. Take about 20 seconds or so, or 30 seconds or so to say something to the viewers.
Okay. Well, if you'd like to find out more about this, you can go to my website. It's www.livinglessstressed.com. And I have a 8-week program that I do. I can do it with individuals, I can do it in groups, and I can even come to your business and do it with your employees.
Terrific. All right. Yeah, I really enjoyed you.
Always love talking to you, Don.
Yeah. And any public service announcements you want to put up? To be sure, to get the local broadcast schedule, go to my website, www.donbaham.com, and click on. Oh, that's my favorite one, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Without Civil Liberties Union, we would have civil liberties down the tubes completely. And we got to learn how to end corporate personhood. And go to move-to-amend.org. It shows that corporations are not persons, the money is not speech. Thanks for watching. And remember KFC, I keep reminding you to remember KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you too. You too. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.